When people say the dog who hasn't barked, they are invoking a remarkably simple rule. Sometimes the strongest evidence is what did not happen. The phrase traces to Sherlock Holmes in Silver Blaze, the case of a champion racehorse that vanished and a stable boy who was found dead. Everyone assumed an outsider had crept in at night. Who else would dare to steal a valuable horse? Holmes asked a single disarming question. Was there any dog in the stables? Yes. Did the dog bark? No. That silence, no warning, no scuffle, ruled out the stranger theory and redirected suspicion towards someone the dog knew. The negative fact carried the positive conclusion. That is why the line lodges in the mind. It turns absence into evidence. To see why that silence is so powerful, consider the ordinary pattern. Typically, if an unfamiliar intruder enters, the watchdog barks, and people are alerted. Cause, signal, consequence. In the Silver Blaze case, the chain snapped in the middle. There was an entry and a theft, but no bark and no alarm. When an expected link fails, the gap is not empty. It is informative. You are forced to reason backward. Instead of starting from a cause and predicting effects, you start from a missing effect and revise the cause. The silence instructs you to reconstruct the story so that all three pieces, who acted, what signal was expected, and what that signal would have meant, fit together without contradiction. Once you see this, the method becomes general. Take any triad of elements, an agent, a signal, and an interpretation. So, first, ask what you would reasonably expect to observe if your preferred explanation were true. Then, compare that expectation with what you actually observe. If the expected signal is absent, don't just dismiss it. Instead, treat the absence as a constraint. The missing bark, in Holmes's case, excludes whole classes of explanations, like, say, anonymous outsiders who would provoke the dog, and elevates others, such as someone familiar, trusted, or regularly present in the stables. A single silent channel becomes a bottleneck. If every plausible scenario under your current theory requires that channel to fire, and it does not, only scenarios that bypass or neutralize that channel can survive. This logic not only narrows the field, it also forces you to explore alternatives before you prune them. Silence might indicate a trusted visitor, but it might also mean that nothing passed near the sensor, that the sensor was disabled, or that it was focused on the wrong area. A watchdog may remain quiet because the visitor is familiar, because the dog was restrained or maybe even sedated, or simply because the disturbance never intersected the dog's line of perception. Each alternative carries its own expected side effects. If silence indicates familiarity, you expect other signs of routine access. No broken locks, no forced doors, no chaos in the straw. If silence indicates incapacity, you expect evidence of that incapacity. A drugged animal, cut tethers, a gate that cannot swing. If silence indicates misdirection, you expect activity shifted elsewhere. Footprints along a back path, lamps trimmed in an outbuilding, tools moved where the dog cannot see. The meaning of nothing happened really depends on which adjacent somethings are present or missing around it. This is why the phrase has resonance in modern domains, where people are, quite frankly, overwhelmed by data, but still miss the most important signals. In finance, a company that always issues earnings guidance but suddenly does not is not doing nothing. The missing announcement is itself a move, and it invites questions about internal uncertainty, regulatory pressure, or strategic hesitation. In cybersecurity, an unfamiliar login that fails to trigger an alert is doubly suspicious. Either the intrusion has found a blind path, or the detection system is misconfigured. In medicine, the absence of a symptom can be decisive. In the presence of several common signs, the missing one may separate one diagnosis from another. In product analytics, a major feature launch that produces no surge in usage and no increase in support tickets is not automatically a success. The silence may indicate that users did not even notice the change. In negotiations, a counterpart who never raises price objections is not necessarily satisfied. Their silence may mean they are not serious about closing at all. In each case, the question is the same. Under my current explanation, what should I be hearing, seeing, or measuring? And if it is not there, what does that non-appearance exclude? Of course, there are guardrails, and Holmes's lesson is as much about discipline as it is about cleverness. First, ensure your expectation is justified. If a dog has been trained not to bark at stable hands, but is silent to the investigator, that training may not offer a complete explanation. Miscalibrated expectations turn every quiet into a false mystery. A muted alarm, a miswired monitor, a sleeping guard, or a log that is known to drop events. All of these produce artificial silences. If the channel itself is broken, its quiet contains no information about the world beyond it. Not every cause roots through the sensor you happen to be watching. Some attacks circumvent your main defenses. Some diseases begin with subtle markers before classical symptoms emerge. Business problems often appear in the side metrics before showing in headline numbers. The discipline is to test the channel that failed, look for collateral traces, and ask what else must be true if the most compelling silent explanation is correct. Once you have done that, the final step is integration. The point is not to fetishize the missing piece, but rather to assemble a story that holds together from beginning to end. In Holmes's case, the non-barking dog implies familiarity. Familiarity implies authorized or habitual access. Non-forced access points to someone inside the circle of trust. And that conclusion must in turn mesh with the physical evidence. The tracks, the time, the opportunities. The silence is not an ornament. It is the hinge on which the entire interpretation turns. When people revive the phrase today, consciously or not, they are reaching for this integrated move. Rather than chase every new piece of noise, start by asking which signals a true explanation would almost certainly generate, and then notice which of those are missing. So, the deeper meaning of the dog who hasn't barked is not merely that absence can matter. It is that absence becomes meaningful only when you explicitly compare expectation, observation, and consequence. State clearly what should have occurred if your story were right. Check whether those things did in fact occur. When you find that something important is missing, treat that missing element as a constraint that reshapes which worlds are still possible. Then test those worlds by looking for the additional traces they would necessarily leave behind. In a world saturated with alerts, updates, and notifications, the real skill is not collecting more signals. It is discerning when a quiet channel is empty and when it is eloquent. Holmes's insight teaches exactly that. Learn to listen for the evidence that arrives as silence, and you begin to see what everyone else has overlooked.